everyone. So we're back with another episode of the Big Question series. We're going to have a really interesting conversation today about transparency and efficiency in pageants. And because there's been a lot going on in the pageant industry, if you've been following. So, me and Lekh are going to be addressing a lot of the things that, as contestants, as people following pageants, you should talk about because, we often don't talk about so many things that a contestant should also look for. If you attended our last live, we talked about how much research goes into it. How do you choose what is the best pageant for you to compete in? And a lot of you actually found that information quite helpful. We talked about contracts, we talked about opportunities, the kind of salaries you get after, competing in pageants. So there's so much that hasn't been spoken about enough. Hello.
Hello, hi.
Hi. See, this is like we just saw each other 10 minutes ago and now we're back here.
Yes, because we have so much to offer and we don't want anyone to miss out on it.
Let's dive straight into it. I think the topic of today's live itself is pretty interesting. I mean, we're talking about things that we all wish to see in pageantry, and as coaches, I think it's our responsibility, right, to talk about this. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, and we even shared it on our feed. If you're following pageants, if you have anything to do with pageants, you probably know that something historical happened, and historical in not a good way. Because for the first time in the history of Miss USA of 71 years of the pageant, for the first time a title holder has resigned. Not one, but two title holders, both the teen and Miss USA have resigned for certain reasons. I encourage all of you to actually follow the news, be informed about why that's happening, because I already saw some of the comments were like, why would you give that position up? And nobody in their right minds would give that up unless they actually had to. There was no other choice. And when, as a pageant contestant, I feel like so many of our audience, right, you're all planning to compete in a pageant. When you see things like that happen, it can be quite scary and confusing that we all have dreamt of being a title holder, but then how does it come to a situation like that, right? And I felt that it's essential that we talk about these things. We talk about how can you avoid being in such a situation, right? um, I want to know, like when you heard that news, like as someone who's been in pageantry, what were your first thoughts?
It's I think it's every title holder's worst nightmare because when we think about runner-ups, we know that they, in the worst case scenario, might end up taking positions if a certain title holder cannot fulfill her responsibility. But you never expect that to happen because it takes so much of blood and tears, quite literally, to get to that position. So, and I know for a fact that every title holder, like, gives her best to keep that position intact. And if a decision like that has to be taken, there is definitely something that's very deep rooted in something that made them take that decision. And I think it should not be ignored in something that we go ahead assuming as, this is something that ends up happening. Every time it happens, there's like a deep rooted reason to it. And I think it's important that we talk about it.
Absolutely. And that too, with just like 2 months to go before she has to pass on her crown. Like, what could be the reason? It's important that we look into it. It's not just something that you scroll past because you're putting your energy into it, right? Talking about pageant news all over the world, in fact, apart from Miss USA, because we're talking about transparency and efficiency in pageants. What we can definitely learn from whatever is happening at Miss USA right now is that organizers and pageant directors have to be so mindful of their title holders' well-being, and they have to do a good job as well. Because I think for the longest time, like, we talk about pageant prep so much, we tell contestants what to do, what not to do, what's the best way to position yourself as a title holder, but that doesn't mean that it takes away the responsibility from the pageant directors themselves. Just yesterday, this was announced, and it was big news to me too, that Nikhil Anand, who's the owner of the Glam Anand Group, is not just the director for Miss Universe India, which was pretty big news, but also Miss Universe Saudi Arabia. And how many? I think I've lost track at this point, but like, how many franchisees does Glam Anand own at this point? Like, I don't.
Yeah, it's insane. I remember we were discussing about the fact that we also, I think there's Miss Cosmos Bangladesh, which is also a part of Glam Anand, and this was news I think a month ago. And if you think about it, that's a lot of pageants to be the national director of.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way. Like, if a contestant told me that she's competing at Miss Universe India and Miss Universe Saudi Arabia, let's say for some reason, somehow she's eligible,
Yeah.
like, my opinion would just be like, what are you doing? Right? Because yesterday somebody asked me, can I apply to Miss Universe and Miss World and Miss Grand and International all in the same year? I said, yes, you can. But why would you do that to yourself? Why don't you just do a good job at one pageant? And as much as I'm rooting for change and I'm rooting for new pageant directors, but when sometimes, you look at something and you're just like, is this an example of somebody biting off more than they can chew?
Yeah, agreed.
How, yeah, because as a contestant, I would look at, okay, this director has not just me, but like 10 other title holders to groom in the same period of time. How is he or she going to guarantee me the opportunities that I'm looking for? Because there's only a handful of things that a person can do. Let's be realistic. And that's why I want to talk about this. And in fact, this brings us to the fact that when Glam Anand put out state directorships, one of the things that I was very, decisive about is that I will not take up a state directorship. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is, one, let the coaches do their job of pageant coaching. Being a
Yeah.
state director, as much as we've seen it, and I would love to see how it all pans out. But my opinions right now is, decide what your profession is, right? If you're a coach, then coach the contestants, right? Running a pageant is a whole other ballgame, and if I take up the directorship, how am I going to put all the hours that I could have put into grooming the contestants and coaching them? It's an exhausting job, right? But it fulfills me. When you try to do too much, I mean, like, we both know this. When we have too much on our plate, we don't do anything right. It's just like it affects all the jobs that you're doing. So that was our reason for like not stepping into director shoes at all. But then now this brings us to the conversation that I want to have. I don't know how many of the people who are here joined, but there's a conflict of interest, right? Like, what do you think? Like, the biggest conflict of interest that I want to talk about, as a pageant coach, do you think you would ever be judging Miss India?
As much as you'd love to, like you'd want to be in those shoes, but like ethically speaking, there's a reason that pageant trainers, you don't see any pageant trainers on the dais asking questions to contestants, and that's mainly because internally, let's say I've trained my girls and they're also there, and then I'm someone who has a mark scorecard. It's like a subconscious thing where I will probably score my contestant because I've trained her. I know this person. I know that the hard work that she's done, or like how much of effort she's put into this. And there's always going to be a soft corner, and that's mainly why they don't take coaches into that space. But when the roles are reversed, that should also hold true, but it's not
Actually,
in this case.
that's exactly. So people have to understand that there's a conflict of interest. We have a comment coming in from Jaya, I think Jaya Kataria, that, not all, yes, all our students
Exactly.
are equal for us. But then, of course, I want my student to win the competition and not a student from another institute. As much as we want the best girl to win, but yeah, you can't put us in the judge's position and then ask us to not to give a good score to our student itself, right? It's human bias. You can't, and you could take our word for it. I could go in and be a judge and be like, you know what, I'm not gonna be unfair, I'm gonna be transparent, I'm gonna be fair, and everybody's equal, but that's just my word for it. And nobody would take my word. And I can tell you from experience, last year, in Bangalore, I was hosting the South Zonal auditions. I wasn't judging them. My batchmate Shanata was judging them, but because she's not a coach, right? I was hosting it, but I also remember during the auditions, I was sitting next to the judges' table, but sitting next to it. And there was a very clear, unsaid understanding of sorts that, like, I knew that even all the contestants, like, they knew that at least 20 girls there at the auditions were from Concord. Now, if they see me talking to the talent team and, whispering to the judges when they're writing scores, I was not involved. I could not be involved involved in that conversation, because it would be unfair, because contestants who haven't been groomed, let's say, they come in and they see like, oh, this girl is trained and her coach is also whispering to the judge sitting next to her, on the table. That just creates unethical work environments, right? Because they don't care what we were talking about. Maybe it wasn't about this course, but I knew that I kept my distance from that table for a reason. Even as a coach who was right there, I never looked at the score sheet, because I know that that would take away the transparency of the system, right? And I wish that it was the case like every other coach was also the same way. We can't control the entire world, but what we can talk about is we can strive to have a fair and transparent system, right? What I feel is that a lot of the times contestants and people in general, when something is benefiting them, they're okay with it. But when it's not benefiting them, that's when they think about the transparency and fairness, and this wasn't right. But I don't want that to be the situation. I want it to be fair no matter who it benefits, right? Just
Yeah, like,
fair and square.
Yeah, even when you think about Harnaz, the year that she won Miss Universe, Urvashi Rotela was called in as a judge, and there was so much chaos already. Harnaz was deserving, absolutely. She was one of the best contestants at the time. But that still does not stop people from saying that, oh, an Indian judge is called, so she's probably going to give more marks. And Urvashi, in the end, I think when they were asking that India won after 21 years and you were a judge, how did you feel? And she did say, oh my god, I gave like out of out scores for India, because come on, it was India. And that's just how it is. That's just how it works, which is why these things need to be, controlled. And that's why if there is a certain judge from a certain country, there are also other judges from other countries, so that there is like a balance from it all. So, the blame or like the situation does not go in a certain way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So,
these things should
as
be
organizations conducting competitions in a public eye at that level, something that now we've established is that pageant coaches are not allowed to judge pageants for a certain reason. There's a conflict of interest, which brings me to the point where right now what I see happening is that so many people have taken up state directorships, right? That's just like, let's talk about Glaman and Miss Universe India. Let's call it Miss Universe India. There are so many directors who are now also coaches. My question is that as a transparent coach, as a coach who strives for transparency in the system, how is the organization going to ensure that the coaches who are state directors, there are state directors who are not coaches, and then there are state directors who are coaches. How are you going to maintain the transparency in that system? And not just that, there's a conflict of interest inside the organization as well. Because something that is common knowledge is grooming sessions are given when contestants compete in a pageant, right? But they're given to all the contestants. Now, I would love for our audience to, in fact, interact with us at this point, because it's one thing to have our opinions. I want to understand from all of our audiences. Just tell us, would you be okay if the organization was giving coaching only to some of the contestants? Let's see, like just a yes or no here. I would love for the audience to, in fact, say, because I want to know what the public opinion is as well.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that I, as a contestant, probably would not think about. And I mean, I think that's one of the main reasons why we're having this conversation, because, like you said, as a contestant, I would probably see that if it benefited me. Let's say Conquer was also the state director of Andhra or Telangana. And yeah, and I was a Conquer student, and I also realize now that Conquer is the state director, or like Nikita is the state director of Andhra. And for me, I'd be like, hey, that's a win-win for me, you know. But there are so many repercussions that we will talk about eventually that contestants don't realize firsthand. But yeah, we have answers coming in, and everybody is saying no. Exactly.
And that's happening. The thing is, I'm glad people understand that the answer should be no, you should never be okay with it. But that's happening right now in the pageant, because certain pageants are opening up grooming schools. And the grooming is not mandatory for the contestants. So there's a lot of concerns that it brings into the industry as general. Like, it's not something that we're talking because, I'm a coach, so nobody else should coach. Of course, no. There should be as many coaches as possible. In fact, during our clarity sessions, we recommend other coaches sometimes, because we feel that that's best for you. And I'm sure a lot of people here who have joined can vouch for that fact. One the biggest conflicts that, is going to come in is like a monopoly can be established within one organization. What is your take on that?
Actually, okay, for everybody, I hope you guys understand monopoly is basically when a certain organization takes up exclusive rights of being a service provider for everything. Let's say Conquer was also a pageant training institute. It also had its own titles under it. It was also taking personal sessions. It was also giving you makeup and hair. So everything would just be Conquer. Do you realize how that causes an issue? And like, if I think about it from what is happening right now, there's one thing for us to really applaud and appreciate the business tactics that the national director is probably bringing in to get all of these franchises under one roof. But at the same time, I think that stifles or like that really constricts innovation as a whole. Now as a contestant, what I will think is, if this organization is providing its own training institute and I want to be in Miss Universe India, my thought process will be, even if I don't maybe have the resources for it, maybe I don't have the time for it, maybe I have something near me, like maybe I have a Conquer Institute in Hyderabad which I can go to, but that institute is somewhere in Delhi, let's say. I might end up having to go there, or might just lose my chance at getting that opportunity, because the girls who train there probably might get an advantage because they train under that institute, and I just sit at loss, thinking this is just how it is. But this is not how it should be. And a lot of times the girls fail to understand that you are the ones who create the brand. It's new, it's still establishing based on what you want out of it. And if you question the right questions, things can change. And that's something that we want you to open your eyes to.
Exactly. And, because we're not competing anymore, so we can't be. We're doing this live. We're trying to put out this information, at least, that if a contestant isn't thinking about these questions, then you probably should start. But at the end, taking a stand for transparency has to be done from a contestant's point, right? As coaches, we can only do so much. And you're right, it kind of limits the option, because I remember I once made this YouTube video also about, is pageant coaching necessary? So many people come and ask us that. And my answer is, it helps. It's not mandatory, right? Now let's look at a few things. Like, when you register for Femina Miss India, you get that the House of Miss India course. In
Yeah.
the episode, we talked about how even though you pay for it once and you get it, like you keep paying, even though the course doesn't change, which to me makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right? Because they say that it's for the grooming course, but then how do you sell a course multiple times? You've already sold it, and apparently they have lifetime access to those courses. So that system needs to just be modified a little bit so that it makes sense in a way. And even after that, we've gotten mixed reviews on that. Of course, now it's a recorded course. Everybody needs different coaching, right? Like we say, like personalized guidance is so important. And what happens is, because you get sucked into the system and you feel like, okay, now I have to be in this network and I have to take coaching from this person so that it gives me an edge in the competition, right? And that's the problem, where I felt that, within an organization also, last time we talked about how there's a preference system. Now do people, and I will talk about this, one, from a coaching angle, you're being pulled towards one option only, not because of what they offer, but because of the opportunity and the possibility of having a preference in the selection process, right? Now it's like dangling, a low dangling fruit for contestants. But then what if you didn't need coaching from that person? What if you needed coaching from somebody else? As a contestant, you should be able to choose. And because of monetary reasons, people are going to obviously not take coaching from like 10 different sources, right? Because she might feel that, okay, I've already put in money here, let's not invest somewhere else again. It kind of restricts the kind of coaching perspectives you might get. Different coaches have different strengths. So it takes away from that. And another thing is that you also might end up competing in a competition just because you know that you're going to get a preference.
Right.
So that, when you put that out as an organization, I start to question, like, how will you guarantee my selection there? And if this is the system, then how does of my skill set, like I know I need to perform and do all of that, but then can you tell us objectively, is it 50% performance and 50% whether or not you've taken coaching from us, or is it 100% performance? And what are, according to you, like if you were a contestant, how would you measure the parameters? Like what are the parameters that will make you decide, what, this is the best coaching organization, this is who I should take coaching from?
I think a lot of parameters that you consider should, for any coach that you want to invest into, should be number one, whether it's feasible for you, number two, whether they have given results in the past, and do you connect with that coaching style. If yeah, it's the kind of coaching, or you understand the coach's background, and then you see, okay, are they qualified enough to be able to guide us in the right path? And yeah, eventually I think the results and the qualifications and the testimonials, and the fact that if my heart really feels like this is something that would benefit me, and of course convenience and feasibility also takes in a certain amount of that space on whether I want to join that institute or not. But if that institute came with a certain assumption that only if I get into this institute will I be able to get a preference in this pageant, I might actually not consider any of that. And that hampers my learning ability in the long run, because I might end up learning almost close to nothing. There's a possibility I just went there and I even didn't learn anything, but I'm just like, okay, at the end of it, at least in the pageant, they might recognize who I am in auditions. And that's just so half-hearted. And pageants in general are an ecosystem, and the ecosystem of any strata or any methodology of an ecosystem should consist of various give and take that happens around, you know. And I can only imagine in India there was just one pageant training institute that existed, every girl that would come out of it would just be like a carbon copy of another. And all of their personalities, because people don't realize that coaches also have the power to transform your personality. We've seen girls being from whoever they are to being the best version of themselves, and a version that we envision for them, and that's what they follow through going ahead. But if we end up being like a coach that probably is trying to have a vision of all these girls should train from us and then go into the pageant, it just lacks diversity, it lacks personality that we're trying to see, and we're just producing carbon copies of girls, and that just breaks my heart, honestly.
So true. I mean, like the kind of girl that represents India is basically sending the exact same kind of girl every year. It reflects poorly on the country. And I have noticed that certain organizations have been trying to change that, right?
Yeah.
By changing the international trainers for our delegates. But one keyword that I noticed that you said here, Lekh, was results, right? Like that's number one. When you go for any coach, you try to look at the results that they have produced in the past. Now, if the pageant is coaching a handful of contestants, let's say those contestants end up winning also, I don't know how to check whether if it was the coaching or if it was where they took coaching from, right? Because the thing is, when you do something that's a conflict of interest with another business that you are running, the credibility of your coaching goes away, right? Because I don't know how to trust your results anymore. So your efficiency also as a coach, wouldn't you want your results to like speak for your coaching style? And if I was running a pageant and I was coaching the girl, sending her to my pageant and then making her win there, I don't call myself a great coach. I'm just like, you're just like recycling girls basically.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense. Um, and when we talk about pageants, like something that we always do at Conquer is try to inform contestants about the business aspect of pageantry. Right now, I would say if an organization has taken up 7, 8 franchisees, right? That's a lot of money that went out of their pocket. And when I look at it from a business standpoint, if I had purchased 8 franchisees, the only thing on the top of my head would be how am I going to recover this money?
Right.
A lot of it has happened. by establishing a team of state directors. But at the same point, it's the money eventually being recovered comes from the contestants. It always does, and that's why it's a pageant, right? That's the part of pageants that contestants have to look at. So if I was to compete, I would look at, okay, how much opportunity am I getting? How much research? What have they done in the past? All of that. Are they having conflicts of interest? Are they a transparent organization? But secondly, are they going to try to recoup the money from me? And
Right.
that's what I'm worried about right now, because the two pageants that they're conducting, the fees that I know about, one of them has a 40,000 fee and one of them has a 3,500 fee. And if you pay the 40,000, you get a preference in the other one. Right. So again,
Yeah.
it makes you question how much of your caliber and your skill matters and how much of it is it you buying into the position. It could be that.
Yes. I agree.
So yeah, this is just something that we want to put out, because as coaches, we are trying to do the best for pageant aspirants and contestants. And I've constantly want to be able to do that through YouTube, through Conquer, through a lot of the workshops that we hold. We're always talking about the changing landscape of pageantry, trying to keep you as informed as possible, make the right choices, because we're seeing things unravel in a very shocking way in a different country. But you can see that these things that probably led to what is happening at Miss USA, I would not want that to be the Indian pageant system either. So it's just time that we talk about the red flags that we see right away. Huh. I'm seeing a lot of people joining in and waving. Would love for our audience to also drop in their opinions. What are you guys thinking? What questions do you have if you were to compete in a pageant? And Lekh, what would be a message that you would want to share, like with contestants who are just watching all of this unfold?
I will get to that, but I have a certain technical thing that I have to correct. So just give me 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
All right. While we wait for Lekh to join back in, I would love for pageant contestants to talk about your recent experiences with pageants. What are your thoughts on coaching, registration fees, pageants, all of it all together? We have Marvin. I would love to know where you're from. You can also drop in your cities and your countries. Where are you guys joining from? Do I feel a certain organization is fair and transparent enough? I think there's always room for transparency, which is why we're having this conversation today. Um, like I said, there are a couple of gaps in the registration process that I wish that they changed, because people are paying the same amount of money for the same product that they've already gotten. That's something that can change. I have my thoughts on eligibility criteria as well. I wish the system was a lot more inclusive. I've been saying that for years and years, and that's a change I'm looking forward to. What else? We had somebody ask, how do you manage your pageants and studies together? We've talked about this so much. In fact, I highly recommend that you watch my YouTube videos if you haven't, because I've spoken about time management. All sorts of pageant contestants are competing and preparing for pageants with a full-time job, with their studies going on. It's just a matter of discipline and time management, because what do you got to do? You got to work out, you got to take care of your skin and your hair, and you got to work on interview prep, ramp walk. I don't think any of these things require so much time that it's impossible to do. It is hard. It's just, it wasn't going to be easy, because I like to say this, that if something was worth if something was easy, then does it even make it worth having? Hi, Nikita. Can I participate in Miss India? Is my video and audio clear or not? I'm getting confused from all the comments that we're getting. Somebody please help me understand if the video and audio is clear. We have questions about, can you compete in another pageant if you're already the winner of another pageant? That depends on your contract as the winner of the previous pageant, if it allows you to do that or not. Welcome back.
I'm trying so hard. Right, I'm back.
Okay, the video is clear. Thank you, Chandana. Thank you, Sandhya. All right, let's get back to where were we? A message you would share with all the contestants looking at pageantry as it is right now.
I would suggest them to not just go with their eyes closed and their blinders on, which I have learned from experience can only hamper your life outside of the pageant, like after you get out of it. And I would definitely suggest to give in enough amount of research about the organization. I think a lot of contestants, and I know from a contestant's perspective, they fail to understand how a certain organization operates as a business. There are certain patterns that you will start to notice. There are certain questions that you should start asking, and really have enough worth to want to believe if this is the time and the money and the emotional bandwidth you want to give to a certain pageant. We can't make that decision for you, but you should definitely be able to make that for yourself. And this live was in general an idea for us to make you want to ask those questions. It's important. Sometimes it's not the answers that help, but it's sometimes just guiding you to ask the right questions. And that's what we're trying to achieve from this live today.
Absolutely. Things can look scary right now. Things can also be very, very confusing. The whole point of today's conversation is not to scare you or, you know, confuse you further, rather, but to just clear out like a fog in your brain. Like, I don't understand. There are so many pageants, and, there are preferences, and then there are coaching options, and there are things that are good for you, and there are things that are a conflict of interest. Now, it's up to you. Do you want to I like to say, like, which side of history do you want to be on? Do you want to be the person who went with the flow because it was benefiting them in that period of their life, and later because if you do that, you don't get to complain when something feels unfair, right? Or you can choose to be on the right side and actually take a stand for things and question things, because what we are seeing right now at Miss USA is that the contestant is what makes the brand. Right now, when Noelia took a stand for what she believes in, they don't have a Miss USA anymore. And I would like to say, I mean, is anyone willing to even step up? Because what is an organization without a title holder? Because if you don't do your job right, the girls are not going to come and work for you, right? And as coaches, the last thing that I will do is, both of us, we are very transparent and honest in the way we talk about things with our contestants. We don't want to tell you to dream about something when the dream doesn't exist, right? That would be unethical. I would not do that as a pageant coach. And that is why we are here for contestants. We are not here to try to fall into the system so that as many girls from Conquer end up winning the title. If it's going to happen through unfair means, we won't do it. We just won't do it, because the point is, like, we've coached you well enough to be able to do that for yourself, right? And that has happened. That has happened. I would like to actually mention that I have been asked at a point, tell us your girls in the pageant and we might help them. And I didn't even give the names of the girls, because I said that would just take away from my coaching. I can't call myself a good coach if I had to give the names of my girls like that. And that is just something I'm never going to do. I mean, my girls might also be like, why not? But no, because you let your performance and your abilities speak for themselves. Like, we cannot fall into systems like that. So yeah, that's just everything we wanted to cover. We can take questions for 5 minutes if the audience has any questions to put in. We do have one from Mehek here. Lekh, can you see that question?
No, I can't.
So my next question is, please give one tip for competing in Miss Universe India, as this is such a new pageant for everyone.
Tip one would be to actually go through their page entirely. Their eligibility criteria has changed, and try to also see from a Miss Universe perspective who are the previous winners that are coming in. Like, I think we we wanted to discuss that, or we did in the last live, that like supranationals of different countries are now coming for Miss Universe. So you also understand, okay, the competition is at that level. What do I have that I can bring to the table that will match up to that level? Because we are trying to, you have to think from a perspective of you already winning the crown and you actually representing India. And only if you go with that mindset will you actually be good enough to even compete in the pageant. Yeah, the tip would definitely be research, not just nationally but internationally, because that's what you're going towards. Mm, yeah, and I think just understanding through and through what they are expecting out of you, rewatching this live and the live we did before, where we also gave a lot of tips and just broke down what Miss World and Miss Universe in general is doing and how the Indian candidates should understand the difference between the two so that you can choose the right option for you. And I think that should clear out most of it.
Yeah, I think though these last two conversations are very, very informative and useful for any contestant to watch. Um, I think we've pretty much covered all of them. Probably given the audience here a lot to think about. And if you guys have any questions related to personal guidance, and you have like, okay, this is my situation. Um, how can you guide me through my situation, whether I should go for this pageant or not, or how I can manage things? If you want us to review your contracts for some reason, you can always book clarity sessions with us because we suggest you whatever is best for you. Even if you need, say, to go for coaching in Delhi, like sometimes we've even given you recommendations for like, okay, in this city, this is what you can do, what is right and what is not. And yeah, I guess we've covered everything.
Yes.
That brings us to an end for today's live. Thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you, Lekh, for your time as well. And I'm glad we were able to speak about these things because I just felt like it's time.
Exactly. I'm glad to.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This live will get saved and will be on our feed and will also be uploaded on my YouTube channel. So you can always watch it if you missed out on any bits and pieces. And have a good night. Bye. Bye, everyone.